It's been a somber day in Ulundi as dignitaries, family, friends and the AmaZulu nation bid farewell to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. It was, however, IFP leader Velenkosini Hlabisa who reminded mourners that in his latter years, uShenge preached peace and reconciliation. Having served the ANC for many years, Buthelezi cut ties with the party, accusing it of abandoning its founding ideals and principles. And that led to him establishing what's known today as the Inkatha Freedom Party in March of 1975. In fact, since then, the relationship between the ANC and IFP has never been cordial, bringing with it bloodshed and insurmountable tragedy. To help us unpack Buthelezi's political peace and reconciliation as South Africa goes into the 2024 general elections, we're now joined by Professor Bheki Mngomezulu of Nelson Mandela University. Professor Mngomezulu, appreciate your time during this sobering event or unfortunate passing of Prince Mangosuthu. But let's talk about how the Prince's role in the founding of the Inkatha Freedom Party impacted the political landscape in South Africa, particularly during the apartheid era.
Thank you very much, Hugo, for having me, and thank you to your listeners. Yeah, Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi played a critical role when he formed Inkatha Nkululeko to fill the political void that had been left by the banning of both the ANC and the PAC, which had split from the ANC in 1959. And then from that time on, he was the eyes and ears of the ANC in South Africa, which is the reason why he kept on reporting his case to the ANC in exile about what was happening in the country. He used to go to Zambia to report to the ANC about developments in the country. But then, of course, that relationship did not last that long, because some within the ANC started having a view that Buthelezi had amassed enough wealth, enough support to the extent that it would be difficult to unseat him in the event that the apartheid government was defeated. And then, of course, they started distancing themselves from the Inkatha Nkululeko then, which was not IFP by that time. And then in 1979, when Buthelezi led a 17-member delegation to London to discuss with the ANC, that was the last time they met until after the ANC had been unbanned. So then that tells you that the relationship between the ANC and the IFP was solid until such time that people from within the ANC started having second thoughts, partly because they were accusing him of colluding with the apartheid by accepting to be the leader of the then KwaZulu government. They then said he can't be part of the Bantustan, which the ANC in fact frowned upon. And then they said if he agrees with the apartheid government that the Bantustan is the way to go, then it means that he has cut ties with the ANC. So those are some of the issues I can raise in the interest of time. But otherwise, the relationship was good. And then at a later stage, in the 1980s mostly, then it was something totally different, which resulted in the so many killings that happened both in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng specifically.
Well, you've raised the issue that's the basis of my next question, and that's around the key factors that contributed to the conflict and the violence between the IFP, led obviously by Buthelezi, and the African National Congress in those periods, the 80s and 90s. Speak to us about that.
As I say, after the last meeting in 1979, which was held in London, when Buthelezi came back, it was clear to him that that relationship was never going to materialize, or it was not going to be sustained. And then, of course, in 1983, there was the formation of the UDF. The formation of the UDF then basically pitted the ANC and the IFP in Inkatha against each other. So the rift was even wider. And as a result, you then had accusations against other people, that is the ANC in the form of the UDF accusing the Inkatha, and then Inkatha on the other hand accusing UDF. And there was lack of respect. Then what happened is that when Inkatha was complaining that it was being attacked and killed by members of the UDF, they then said, Buthelezi in fact is on record saying that I can't let my people die in the manner they are dying. They must defend themselves. Then he formed what was called the self-defense, the self-protection unit. Those are the people who were trained in Caprivi at the Mlaba camp. And then on the other hand, the UDF had its own defense as well, which was called the SDU, Self-Defense Unit. So you have the Self-Defense Unit on the side of the UDF, and then we have the Self-Protection Unit on the side of Inkatha. Then this situation then continued, and the apartheid government rejoiced when that happened, because at least now they could kill people from both sides. When they killed people from the UDF side, they would claim that they'd been killed by Inkatha. When they killed people on the side of Inkatha, they would claim that they'd been killed by UDF. So pitting the two against each other. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there were no UDF ANC members who were killed by IFP, and it doesn't mean that there were no IFP members who were killed by UDF ANC. But the reality is also that there are people from both sides who were killed by the apartheid government, and they were arming other people in order to push their own agenda. And that situation then continued until the Shell House massacre, which you remember when Inkatha was protesting against the ANC, saying that they were looking down upon the institution of traditional leadership. And then as they were heading towards the Shell House, which was the headquarters of the ANC, then those who were protecting Luthuli House, then of course opened fire, and then a number of people died. Figures will tell you that about 19 people died. Of course, the number might be more than that, but those are the official figures that we have. So the violence that happened in the 1990s was not either as a result of the ANC or as a result of the IFP, but it was a combination of those factors, and then of course factoring in the role played by the apartheid government. Lastly, I know that for also the issue of the Zulu police was factored in, and the issue of a group which was called the Cats Constables. They operated mainly in Natal Midlands, and in some instances they were aided by the apartheid government, which wanted to push its own agenda. So that is how complex the situation was, which is why so many people died, and then it took that long to have peace between the ANC and the IFP.
Okay, so let's look now at the period post in 1994. What role did Buthelezi play in the post-apartheid government of South Africa, particularly during his 2 terms as a Minister of Home Affairs?
First of all, he played a critical role on the eve of the election in 1994 by agreeing at the last minute to be part of that new political dispensation. At the a request by the late Professor Washington Okomo from Kenya, who convinced him that if the elections were to go on in 1994 without the IFP, which had changed its name from Inkatha Nkululeko Sizwe to Inkatha Freedom Party as a political organization, and it had also changed its colors by adding red and white to the normal green, gold, and black they were using, which were colors of the ANC. So then from 1994, when the government of national unity was formed, Buthelezi was part of that establishment, which in itself was a good gesture, because it meant that it was going to assist in calming down the political situation that was volatile at the time. And then, of course, he agreed also when Mandela appointed him to be the Minister of Home Affairs, basically showing that he was prepared to be part of the collective that was going to build the new South Africa. And then that situation continued for some time. And under Mbeki, Buthelezi would have been appointed as Deputy President. But unfortunately, as you might know, there was a leak of information that Mbeki was about to appoint him as his deputy, and then some people said this was in return of him handing over KwaZulu-Natal to the ANC, and then the situation got out of control, then it never materialized. But ever since, he has played his role, including when the EFF came into the picture. He was the person who was bringing calm in the National Assembly. And this was confirmed by Mapisa Ngabula today when she was speaking at the funeral. And a number of other people, of course, including even the president himself, agreed that there were times when situations would get out of hand, and then he was the voice of reason, because he would appeal to all political parties and say, you can disagree with someone, but still show respect.
Professor Mngomezulu, we're going to take a short breather and continue with this important conversation in a moment. We're continuing our conversation with Professor Bheki Mngomezulu of Nelson Mandela University as we take a look at the life and legacy of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Professor Mngomezulu, thanks for staying with us. Now, as we carry on this conversation, let's look at how Buthelezi's leadership and political ideology influenced the Zulu nationalist movement and obviously the province of KwaZulu-Natal, because we do appreciate that he was a most influential individual.
Yes, indeed, there is no doubt about that. And one of the reasons why he was so influential is because he wore different caps. On the one hand, he was a traditional leader, which then meant that the manner in which he was brought up was such that he had to know how to lead people and how to talk to people. And then, of course, he was a member of a church, the Anglican Church, where he occupied a leadership position, and that too groomed him. And then as a politician, of course, he learned how to maneuver different political environments and how to control people and do those kinds of things. So, and also the fact that he was appointed as the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation. So all of these positions assisted him in maneuvering the political situation in the IFP, and then, of course, the political situation in government. And was an influential leader in a number of respects, but mainly in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, particularly because a number of people who reside in Gauteng had originally come from KwaZulu-Natal. So basically, Gauteng became an extension of KwaZulu-Natal, so to speak. Others went to work in the mines, others went there for different purposes. But indeed, he commanded support mainly in those two provinces, because that is one thing that I think the IFP needs to work on. That is to make sure that it has footprints in all 9 provinces. Because if you don't have footprints in all 9 provinces, you don't stand a chance of either being the official opposition or being the governing party. That is exactly what the same thing also that is affecting the DA, that it doesn't have footprints in all 9 provinces. That is one area that I think that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, influential as he was unable to penetrate through the other provinces to make sure that his support base transcend the geographical boundaries of KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng.
Now, Professor, when we look at his legacy and the influence of what's likely to happen post his passing, we have to go back to the 70s, where he broke away from the ANC, or severed ties with the ANC, and the reason he did that, as we said in the intro, was because he accused the ANC of abandoning its founding ideals and principles. Now, can you provide insights into Buthelezi's reconciliation with his ANC rivals, which is what is currently happening, and obviously the implications of it? Have the ANC gone back to its roots, so to speak?
Not necessarily. The ANC has not gone back to its roots. And for it to go back there, a lot of work will have to be done. One, you will have to do away with the career politicians. People who become politicians by chance, but they don't have what it takes. And you can tell that through what people do, and they basically put themselves before the organization. That is totally wrong. They put themselves before the people they are leading. That is also totally wrong, because you are as good as the people you lead, and you are as good as the party you are a member of. The moment you disregard the people you are leading, the moment you disregard the party you are a member of, then of course you have lost focus. What used to happen then is that politicians would put people first, which is why a number of those who went into exile, they sacrificed a lot, because they were saying that we can sacrifice for as long as our people are going to benefit. Listen to the story of Kalosho Mahlangu. When he was on his way to the gallows, he said, "Tell my people that I love them." That is the kind of sacrifice that you had then, which you can't have now, because all people are interested in at the moment is just to amass wealth, even if it means doing so through crooked means.
So Professor, allow me to interject then. The Deputy President has been preaching the need for reconciliation, for the IFP and the ANC to work together ahead of next year's election. Is it all politicking? Is it about the numbers in next year's vote? Because if you're saying to us that the ANC has not gone back to its roots, and that the reason that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi broke away from the ANC was for this very reason, why would there be so much talk now about that reconciliation, if you will?
I'm not too sure if it's factually correct to say Buthelezi broke away from the ANC. The only thing I can say is that some members of the ANC, those who were in exile, lost trust in Buthelezi. for the reasons I've stated earlier on. The fact that he was part of the Bantustan did not go down well with some leaders of the ANC. And had it not been for Tambo, in fact, this severing of relations would not have happened in 1979. It would have happened earlier. But Tambo said, no, let's give him a chance. We need him more now than we needed him then, because he's the only person who's remaining in the country, and he's the only person who understands how we operate. But then you will also recall that after the 1976 Soweto uprising, a number of youngsters left the country and went into exile. And that is where the eyes of the world then started noticing what was happening in South Africa, and the issue of sanctions came in. And then Buthelezi held a different view, because when the ANC was saying that the international community must impose economic sanctions against South Africa to accelerate the pace towards democracy, Buthelezi said, no, you cannot impose sanctions on the government, because people who are going to be on the receiving end are the very same people who claim to be fighting for. And that, of course, then caused divisions between himself and, of course, the ANC. Then the other point that caused division was when the ANC, on 16 December 1961, launched Umkhonto Wesizwe, saying that we cannot negotiate with the apartheid government because it's not listening to us. Buthelezi was not in favor of the armed struggle. So those are the two issues, the issue of the sanctions and the issue of the armed struggle. So it's not as if he severed the relations, but there were differences of opinion, and then, of course, gradually the rift between him and the ANC then became wider. On your point about the deputy president, ask yourself the question, which is what other people have been asking. They are saying, why now? Because for a very long time, there was no talk about this multi-party talk to try and come up with a framework to determine how coalitions are going to be managed. Some of us have been making this call for a very long time, saying that because we don't have a framework and we have not yet reviewed the Electoral Act, and we have not reviewed the Constitution to speak to that particular issue. So I think that the deputy president, and in fact the governing party as a collective, they've been watching the situation and they've been listening to these voices, and now they are saying, let us have an open discussion to come up with a framework as to how we're going to control these coalitions. Because truth be told, there might be a number of hung, provinces next year. We've been talking about hung municipalities all along, but the prospects of having hung provincial governments are very high. So in anticipation of that, then the deputy president is saying, let us all come together and talk about this. But then some opposition parties are saying, this is too little, too late. Others are open. In fact, they are saying that the only reason why the governing party is making that play is because they are fearing that they might not get the 50+1 threshold needed to govern the country. So there is politics involved there. I don't think it's all genuine. There might be a little bit of being genuine, but in the main, it is not.
Professor Bheki Mngomezulu of Nelson Mandela University, thank you so much for your time unpacking those issues for us. You watching news at Prime.